Good afternoon. Welcome back to the City Design and Sustainability Symposium. We have really enjoyed the conversation so far and look forward to two more panels this afternoon. The first is the Policy of Design panel, which is moderated by Brian Helmuth. Brian Helmuth is a professor here at Northeastern. He is the director of the Marine Science Center, and he holds a joint appointment in the Department of Marine and Environmental Science and the School of Public Policy. We're very pleased to have Brian here with us, and this is one of perhaps his first public activities at Northeastern. So welcome, Brian. Welcome to the panelists, and we look forward to your conversation.
Thanks, Jane. I really need to start off by admitting I'm really a fish out of water here. I arrived the day before Nemo, and as Jane said, I am a marine biologist. I'm not director of the Marine Science Center. I'm director of a new initiative here looking at sustainability science and policy on main campus with a heavy focus on coastal ecosystems. So I stepped in as moderator for Joan Fitzgerald pretty recently. We have three fantastic speakers today, so I think they will carry this themselves, but as a newbie, forgive me if I ask any kind of naive questions. We have three speakers, as I said. The first is going to be Nicole Fischera, who is the Innovation District Manager for the Boston Redevelopment Authority. She works in the Business Development Division as the Innovation District Manager for the City of Boston. For anyone who doesn't know, and I learned this recently, the Innovation District is Mayor Menino's initiative to transform about 1,000 acres of underdeveloped land in the South Boston waterfront into an urban environment that fosters innovation, entrepreneurship, and collaboration. And she is a Northeastern alum. Next up, then, we have John Dalzell from the Boston Redevelopment Authority. At BRA, he leads the Green Building and Sustainable Development Initiatives, including sustainability and green building policy development. For example, the 2007 enactment of Boston's Green Building Zoning Regulations, which made Boston the first major city to require private developers to build LEED certified structures. Additionally, he focused city resources on sustainable development through community-based planning initiatives and programs. In 2011, he launched the Mayor's E+ Green Building Program to test the feasibility of urban environmental, energy, and equity-positive E+ residential prototypes. He's a member of the U.S. Green Building Council National Board of Directors, he served as a nationally elected member of USGBC's LEAD for Neighborhood Development Core Committee and is vice chair of the USGBC Location and Planning Technical Advisory Group. He's also a founding board member of the USGBC Massachusetts chapter. And then batting cleanup, we have Kathleen Bourne, who is the chairperson of the Cambridge Redevelopment Authority. She currently serves as chair of CRA, which undertakes urban redevelopment projects and other economic development activities in the city of Cambridge. In the last 30 years, the CRA has focused its attention on the Kendall Square area, which I believe she'll discuss a little bit today. She's an architect with 35 years of experience of a range of project types, including housing, infrastructure, and mixed-use urban development. She was elected 4 terms of the Cambridge City Council, where she served as chair of the Ordinance Committee and the Public Facilities Committee. So as you can see, we have a wide array of expertise here, and I invite our speakers to let us know what they're up to.
So it's my turn.
It's your turn.
Okay. So hi, I'm Nicole Fischera. I guess I'm leading off here. It's incredible. I feel like such a newbie. I'm very new at the city, but I'm very excited to be working on the Innovation District, which, as Brian explained, is the mayor's initiative to transform 1,000 acres of underdeveloped waterfront into an area that supports innovation and entrepreneurship. And so I'm just going to blast through a presentation here for you guys, but just to set the stage, this of course is the city of Boston, and you can see the location of the Innovation District directly across from East Boston and the Logan Airport, 10 minutes from the airport, across from Financial District downtown, with the connection on the Red Line corridor directly to Kendall Square and Harvard and MIT. So really extremely well located place to really look at how we can build a new urban area around principles of innovation and entrepreneurship and collaboration. So this is just to give you a sense of the kind of range of activities in the area, everything from clean tech incubators, prototyping wind turbines that float in the sky, to high-end retail, to public spaces and meetups and restaurants, concerts and events, and of course industry, manufacturing, and fisheries. This is our strategy for looking at development in this area. Of course, clustering companies, housing models, and infrastructure, but the mayor has really been looking at these in terms of how they can help people connect better with each other and make the connections and networks that are going to help push their ideas to the next level. And so this is just a diagram kind of the ways that collaboration can happen cross-sector in the area, because it truly is a diverse landscape of companies and interests popping up that are beginning to mix together in really fascinating ways. 5 key characteristics: location. This here is an aerial shot of the Innovation District. You can see, I don't always talk to urban designers and architects, but I think the fascinating thing really is the range of scales and the real variety of existing stuff that's here. Everything from the convention center, which is actually getting bigger, if you can believe it, to the cluster of Fort-Point warehouses, to the former rail yards, now turned parking lots, really ripe for brand new development, and the former military base down in the Boston Marine Industrial Park. So a big area with a lot of very varied urban types. An idea of some of the cultural and kind of public space amenities, a real range of alternative business spaces as well as more traditional industries, looking at new models of housing, again, to encourage collaboration between community members and bringing back to sustainability. We see people moving into this neighborhood that have a very different set of agendas, and that sustainability is a huge part of what they're looking for, what they're willing to pay for. And so, thinking about a smaller kind of private space attached to shared collaborative amenities and an entire building community that is focused on issues that they can connect on a range of different levels. So transit infrastructure, of course, the red line connects at South Station. The silver line also 10 minutes to the airport. And then the Hubway bike sharing program, which has just been an unbelievable runaway success. Is populating all over the city. We've got 6 in the Innovation District. Some ideas of some of the companies that have really led the charge: Bright Cove and Communispace, big kind of software-backed communications companies. This is just to give you an idea of the real range of folks that are moving into the neighborhood, and also the scope of the development that's happening. Everything that's sort of a pinkish color on there is what is not built yet. So there's a lot more coming. There's about 20 million square feet built out, 20 million left to go. This is just some of the companies. So Gazelle is recycling iPhones and iPads. Jimbara is custom-made jewelry. You can go on their website and say, I want a gold ring with a ruby in this setting, and they will make it to order, and they're just totally transforming the jewelry industry. Babson Entrepreneurship College has a graduate campus in the Innovation District. Some meetup groups that have developed on their own. These are some of the key developments that are really pushing the neighborhood forward. 23 acres at Seaport Square. Fan Pier, already a major driver, with Vertex coming in, is the largest private development in the country currently in terms of budget. One Marina Park Drive that houses Mass Challenge is the world's largest startup accelerator. Seaport Square also has the Innovation Center, the Public Innovation Center, which I'll show you more about it in a minute. And Atlantic Wharf, of course, home of the Boston Society of Architects, and an extremely sustainable kind of showcase project. And this is the Innovation Center, literally public infrastructure for networking, an entire new way of thinking about infrastructure, not just moving people but really connecting them with each other and building an entire public building that's dedicated to that and that feels public, in a sort of urbanistic way. It's not tucked into a larger development that as you walk by it in the street, it really is meant to be something that you can be curious about and figure out what's going on here. And so then that's just some kind of contact information. How did I do?
Great. Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
That was probably the fastest I've ever given that presentation.
That's great.
very exciting.
All right. John, let me pull yours up.
I'm going to swing wide because I can't quite sustain that turnaround.
Oh, I should have done that.
Tough act to follow. That was great, Nicole. Thanks. Brian did a great job of introducing me, so I'm not going to belabor this, but just was going to talk about what is core to my work, and that's transformation of practices, and then with a little luck, I'll end squarely in the Innovation District. At least that's the plan. We recently got some great news, which is Boston and our state of Massachusetts has been ranked the 4th greenest city in the U.S., driven by the number of LEED certified green buildings. I think the mayor can take a great deal of credit for anchoring those numbers. There's certainly a wonderful practice in Cambridge too, but throughout the state. But we're, as Brian said, we're the first city in the country to require all large development to be green certified projects. So I think that's really been driving practices within what is regulatory required, but also just what is happening everywhere throughout the city. I can think of even many instances, frankly, where without even the market transformation, people are building greener buildings simply because that's what the market delivers. It's almost getting to a point where the market doesn't know how to build in its old ways. So with that behind us, the game is moving on and moving up, and what we're pioneering now are energy-positive green buildings. We're trying to be very holistic about this and look at social equity as well as environmentally positive performance around these buildings. But it was a really interesting pilot program. There were 14 respondents to the program. These are residential projects. They use the home energy rating system as an indicator of performance. In my hands, my good home probably has a HERS index of, I don't know, 120, 130, 140, something like that. A new code compliant home would be at 100, and these homes are coming in the 30s. So they use about the third of the energy of a typical brand new code compliant home. But then with a robust PV array and solar thermal, they actually generate annually more energy than they use. It's a pretty incredible transformation, and if you step back a little bit, what you can start to imagine is how neighborhoods could be powering a city during the day, sort of imagining houses scattered around a downtown, providing the energy for a microgrid or even a macro grid. This is the first of them to go into construction, and there's a neat story here, which is the projects we selected. We wanted some that really took on the architecture challenge of coming up with a new prototype and looking very much like an energy-positive building, whatever that might look like. We wanted it to look that way, and so this really has a new look. It's in a historic area, the Fort Hill neighborhood of Roxbury, and it carries that genre. I don't have an image here, but in fact, the greenest, fastest, most energy positive, smartest of the buildings is a pair of buildings that go off on the motif of a Greek Revival house with a carriage barn in the back. It's very historically contextual. It doesn't look like anything other than, page 42 out of a builder's catalog. But it is the greenest, most energy positive of the submissions, and would have the 4 units will produce enough energy to power up a code compliant home. So they're running in the negative 25 if you use that HERS indice. We're so excited about the work, and absolutely counting our chickens before the eggs have hatched, and have expanded this practice to energy positive green communities. And what we're looking at now are 2 larger sites, about 2 acres each, where we can aggregate a bunch of energy positive buildings. We want to expand the typology from the, say, 4-unit row house or the side-by-side or stacked 2 family that we we have in the pilot to multifamily apartment building types of structures. We also want to add some retail commercial uses to the mix and see how that can benefit the overall development. But with a larger site, we have a great opportunity to look at how the buildings relate to the site, how the overall site relates to the community, and how we can in fact make a community more sustainable, perhaps by adding uses that are absent in the area that would make it a much more livable place. Or in the case of the Mission Hill site, we have a community garden anchoring the center of this. And this coincides nicely with our efforts to promote urban agriculture. So we have really centered around this as a cluster of homes, an apartment building, and the idea that you could have a robust urban garden sitting on this site. It's also the idea is to have some pathways. I should skip forward a little bit. Here are two sites. The top left is Mission Hill, and the bottom right is Highland Park neighborhood of Roxbury. And here on this plan, we're dabbling in the idea that these gardens can, again, anchor residential development with some commercial retail use, but also include pathways. There's a great deal of grade change from Parker Street on the left down to Terrace, about 30 feet. And it's both a urban obstacle, classic, how do you get around the neighborhood when there's so much grade change, to an urban opportunity where we can promote outside active living, active uses. So now you have an inviting pathway. Because we have so much program to play with, we can actually weave a pathway that's completely accessible through the site without the necessities of handrails and things like that, but just by gradual grade changing through the site, and really produce an environment that's inviting, active, invigorating to all our users, young, old, limited ability users. But here, this is really the beginnings of trying to take this practice to the next level and really start to expand upon it. So, being impatient and working for a mayor who, despite being in office for almost 20 years, is also exceedingly impatient, we are once again counting our chickens long before they've hatched. And really picking up on the E+ Green Communities work is this concept of eco-districts. It's been pioneered by the Portland, Oregon Sustainability Institute, and with the help of the Urban Sustainability Directors Network, they're taking this nationwide and developing a model for eco-districts that municipalities can pick up like a toolbox and start to deploy within their cities. Boston has been working with POSI for about a year now, and we are focusing our efforts on the innovation district. The opportunities and the raw material that is already there in the innovation district is very, very exciting. It's a much larger scale than what's generally been envisioned for these eco-districts, but it's such a fabulous opportunity with 10 million square feet to come, but also with the very brand that we're working with in terms of innovation, with the kinds of businesses and the kinds of people that we're attracting to the area. We really have an unprecedented opportunity to explore sustainability on a profoundly different level. Some of it's very traditional stuff in terms of sustainability around energy, microgrid concepts, things like that. Some of it's old school and is in fact going on now, where Harpoon Brewery takes their spent hops and sends it out for processing into farm soil feed. So, it's getting distributed out into fields and probably coming back to us as corn and broccoli and so forth. But there are more opportunities in terms of basics, like there's ice-making facilities that have huge amounts of heat that they're shedding. And then you have businesses that are looking for heat for cleaning fish, running hot water supplies and things like that. We also have a very dense area with a pretty significant power demand coming at it. And today we do not have the energy infrastructure to meet our future growth plans. So there'll be major investments in energy infrastructure. And it begs the question, what should we be investing in? Should it be a new Power feed from, sources of energy north or south into Boston. These power feeds cost, upwards of $1 billion to run into a new substation to power up an area like this? Or can we look at energy efficiency strategies and energy sharing strategies and energy swapping strategies and find a different investment model that might, in fact, take that $1 billion worth of infrastructure, traditional infrastructure, and repurpose it in a way that spurs a truly innovative district. What will that take? It'll take relationship management, actually. This is where this transformation work gets really cool. So absolutely business to business, but it's also business to residents. Residents and businesses have this yin and yang relationship around energy and resources. Residents to institutions. We know very well that it's got to be a cool place if people are going to live and work there. Good thing we got Nicole working on that. She's imbuing coolness. But it's also residents to city, and obviously we in Boston maintain a very close relationship with our resident population, but also to our business population. And I see the city with the eco-district model as being a convener of this conversation. So we'll be looking to up the game on sustainability, on climate change preparedness. Again, a classic, Boston old infrastructure, wonderful location, highly vulnerable. So we've got some challenges ahead of us, but this is a new opportunity for us. And of course, building on the green building work that I think we've already proven to be a very, very successful model for cities like Boston.
Thanks, Sam. Do you want to come up here? Sure.
Because those two slides, I need to see the top and the bottom. I can just curse.
All right.
Okay. Oops. Wait a second.
Is that the right
I'm
one?
accustomed. It is the right one, but I'm accustomed to using a Mac. So just which click where? Just click it.
Yeah, I'll put it down there. You click it.
Sorry. To go down.
Sure. It's right down there.
Right. Okay. Then I. Wait a second. Yeah, like that. Okay, there we go. Thank you very much for having me, and I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate my colleagues from Boston on the incredible progress that you've made on the Innovation District. And I need to share with you that when I did my graduate thesis at MIT in 1997, I used the Fan Pier as the development site, and it was a kind of a combination, as things were in the 70s, they were a little looser, and it was a combination urban redevelopment plan and photographic essay. And the photographic essay was on forgotten and abandoned places. And I thought if I'd had a chance, I would have dug them out. I've got some terrific photos of the old abandoned rail cars, and it was like a urban wilds. I took a lot of pictures of the wild plants that were growing down there, and whoever would have thought, time goes by, and actually the main message. Well, first of all, let me tell you a little bit about the Cambridge Redevelopment Authority, which is a very different kind of agency from the Boston Redevelopment Authority, although they share the same moniker. The Cambridge Redevelopment Authority has a much narrower focus. It isn't technically a citywide planning agency in the way that the BRA is. It was started in Cambridge adopted in Cambridge under the state legislation 121B that enabled redevelopment authorities to come into existence in Massachusetts during the depressed time of the 60s and the early 70s. And initially, the Redevelopment Authority in Cambridge had a broader citywide focus and developed a few pieces of land throughout the city. But eventually, it came to concentrate on Kendall Square. The reason for that was that probably some of the older folks in the room remember this, and some of the younger ones don't. But when John Kennedy was the president, he had planned for NASA headquarters to be in Kendall Square, right? Where I'm showing you that kind of empty space in the middle, and actually without the Draper Labs that are down on the bottom. And we would have been instead of hearing Ground Control Houston, we would have been hearing Ground Control Cambridge. When Kennedy was assassinated and Johnson became president, the concept of NASA was moved to Texas. And initially that was seen as a great blow to Cambridge, but in fact history has proven this a very fortunate relocation. The land that was supposed to be NASA sat vacant for a while, and then the redevelopment authority took proposals for the development of the property. And after a great deal of debate, Boston Properties, which was then a new developer, brand new, Mort Zuckerman and Ed Lindy, were selected to be the developers of an office park there. And that was in the mid-'70s. That development agreement has been amended many times, but it has essentially stayed in place. Oh, and I should also mention that the redevelopment authority did a study and declared this an urban renewal area, which meant that the economics and the structure of how the development happened was freed from many of the constraints that you would have ordinarily with urban development. And it's been a slow process. It's, for those of you who know the area, Kendall Square has taken a long time to get to where it is today, and I was reminiscing with some folks before the seminar that I think it was less than 10 years ago. I was at an urban land conference outside of Boston. It was, in Phoenix or New Orleans or someplace like that. And I went to a panel on some sort of urban development panel, and Kendall Square was really held up as the bad boy, what you really, really never want to do. I remember going up to the panelist, who I've not forgotten who that is, but I won't mention it, his name now, and say, come on, give us a little break. Things are getting a little better here. And, if I flash forward, I think, about 2 or 3 years ago, and I will explain in a minute how I became, this is before I was involved with the Redevelopment Authority, I met a friend for a drink and took the subway. I live in Porter Square, and I got on the subway and I went to Kendall Square. And I got off the subway, and it was a Wednesday night at about 6:30. And I looked around me, and I said, wow, who are all these people? And we were going to a brand new restaurant, and we sat down in the restaurant, and it was absolutely jammed. The bar of the restaurant was jammed at 6:30. And it was that kind of realization that made me think, Kendall Square is here. It's finally happened. And oddly enough, very little at that point had changed architecturally or physically. What had changed was the number of, first of all, a couple of housing developments, the Watermark and 303 3rd Street, had been built with private money and not on redevelopment authority owned land. And that had brought in around, let's see, I guess it would be about 700 units of housing. And that plus the companies that had come into Kendall Square had made all the difference. They had really populated the place with young people, with an international set of people, with bright people who wanted to spend time there and didn't see this as an office park that they were going to during the day. They were people who were going to stay at night. They were going to work late hours, and all of a sudden, before I knew it, starting sometime maybe 2 or 3 years ago, Kendall Square was being pointed to as an example of success rather than an example of failure. And I'm sure that some people want to know what happened. And for those of you who know Cambridge, Cambridge doesn't even have a very strong economic development department. What really happened in an organic way. One company came, and then another company came. It became known as a good place to work, and hopefully it's increasingly becoming known as a good place to live. And we now have we've lost Vertex to the city of Boston, and congratulations. But we do have close to Kendall Square, it's actually in Central Square, the North American headquarters of Novartis, which is a Swiss company, Swiss pharmaceutical company, Biogen's headquarters. And actually that's a little interesting story. I'm going to take a little detour here. Should I take the detour or should I do it at the end? Let me think. I think I'll do it now. Biogen is a company that probably most of you have heard of, a major biotech company. It's actually Biogen IDEC now. And I don't know how many of you know the Rosabeth Moss Cantor rules for development, a place that is attractive for development. I'm sure you all probably do. The 4 rules are proximity to an airport, proximity to a university, talented workforce, and the 4th one is the place where the CEO of the company wants to work, or parenthetically live. In the case of Biogen Idec, the wonderful man who had been the CEO lived in Wellesley and decided to move the headquarters to Weston. 2 years later, he retired and a new CEO came in. This is about 2 years ago, and the headquarters are moving back to Cambridge. So we consider that a big piece of our success. We also are about to welcome Amazon's Northeast headquarters to Cambridge, and that's an interesting story as well. When Amazon was trying to decide where to locate their Northeast headquarters, they had a seed office, and I'm actually not sure this is whether the office was in Boston or Cambridge. I think they had about 40 people working there, and they polled those people plus the future employees, the employees that they were intending to move from, I think Amazon's in Seattle, is it, or is it in California? I can't even remember. Move to the Northeast. They told them about where they wanted to work, and because the experience of the seed, the small operation, had been so successful in the Boston-Cambridge area, they chose Cambridge over New York, and so we're about to welcome about 700 Amazon employees to Cambridge. Interesting. And we have the Northeast headquarters of Microsoft, and are about to have a major Google project in Cambridge, which we hope will be we hope that will add kind of an innovative flavor. So what can I draw from all of this for you? First of all, I think the main thing that it takes is patience. And I'm not... Patience, and I think sometimes the key ingredients for what triggers success are somewhat unpredictable, but you need to have the framework in place, which I know that Boston is doing very well, and probably better than Cambridge did in Kendall Square. But and then I think there's also the other point that I would like to raise is how many different disciplines are involved in the creation of a successful innovation district. And I started to make a list of them, and I got to about 20. And this isn't anything that you don't know. But being an architect, I always start with the architect at the center of everything, which is actually not true. But we all like to think that it is. But you know, the list that I came up with was architect, landscape architect, urban planner, transportation planner, property owner, developer, financial people, the municipalities, administrative and elected officials, the state administration and elected officials, the public, the general public and their opinion and how they can influence public policy is important. And then the consumers, people are going to be the residents, the owners of the businesses, the real estate brokers. The businesses are large, the businesses are small, and I forgot all about the engineers. And that gets you to 20. And how you orchestrate these different groups, what piece of the planning process comes first? Boston, I think, is probably doing it right. I think Cambridge probably didn't. In Cambridge, it happened a little bit more, and it did take 40 years to happen. But eventually, because the framework was right, things fell into place, and we were very, very lucky. Let me describe where Cambridge is right now, the Redevelopment Authority. Actually, the Redevelopment Authority became a little bit moribund. For about 10 years, it was kind of a sleepy institution. It had had a staff of as many as 15 people at one time and was down to a staff of 3. And the city manager and the city council decided to reinvigorate the authority and appointed 5 new board members, of whom I was one. And we've made some changes, and we are probably about to embark on some spot redevelopment areas in the city. Fortunately, the public sentiment has swung around a little bit towards development. I think particularly young people today are recognizing that density of development creates vital places, and we're looking at building more housing and more commercial space in Central Square, and I'm hoping that the Redevelopment Authority will take a great part in that. And I'm just going to show you a couple of pictures here. This is Kendall Square before, this is Kendall Square afterwards, and it's not done yet. I mean, as you can see, there are a lot of the urban renewal areas right here, and just to the north of that building, this is an old picture. There's a new building for Biogen being built, and there's the new Google connector building, which isn't on there. And then I'm just going to show you a couple of, whoops, I have to go to the other slide here.
Files.
The other file. Maybe you could put that one on.
Sure.
Oh, okay, here's a picture of Kendall Square in 1970. And here is a picture of it. This is the Microsoft headquarters just above the trees. Same building, a lot of investment in the landscape and roadways. And off to the left, off of the picture, is the new Sloan School of Business, which has really contributed, I'd say, about probably 1,000 people a day to the urban life of that area. So that's all I have to say. Patience.
Well, thanks to all three of you. I'm going to ask a couple questions.
Get that bad picture off of it. That's really...
It's inspiration. I'll ask a couple questions of the panel, and then we'll open up to the floor for questions. But for starters, I want to play devil's advocate to what you just said, Kathleen. Is climate change a game changer? If all of this takes patience, yet things are changing faster than we've ever seen before. I mean, as a scientist, every time we make predictions of the future, they end up worse than what we projected the last time. How much does this change what you're doing, or can it change it? Is it just that policy inherently changes so slowly that there's nothing we can do to accelerate it, or can we afford to be patient?
Oh, boy. I would like to say that on climate change, I don't think we can afford to be patient. Yeah. When I was talking about patience, I was talking about economic success. But sure. Climate change is really, I see it as an investment in the infrastructure.
Are there too?
I was interested in the way you frame that. This is about design and policy, so that seems a bit appropriate. But the success I think we're seeing, certainly in Boston and Cambridge, but nationally and now internationally, has much more to do with a broader-based transformation. And I think this is perfect for today. I think I kind of want to reject the concept of public policy-driven processes. I think the public has an integral role. It's essential. It's probably best around leadership. But the horsepower, I think, really comes out of what this country was built around, which is commerce and capitalism. Embrace your inner capitalist if you can for a moment. But that we can sometimes surmise that we've gotten ourselves into this mess because of a laissez-faire approach to commerce and externalizing all kinds of enormous impacts on air, water, sea, our environment, our plant life. And commerce was the villain in that story. But today, commerce has the ability to actually bring many resources to those challenges, to those problems, and turn them around. So I don't think we can afford to be patient. And I don't think we can afford to do things in the way that we've done them in the past. I think the other part of this might have to be with kind of celebrating what's at the forefront. So climate change, when you look at it, it's a really nasty bit of business. 2 feet in the innovation district is a major problem. A 4-foot storm surge is a game changer. And if we sit around and worry about this stuff, I don't think we'll do anything terribly creative or quick or even all that remarkable. On the other hand, if we come at this and say, look, we can do amazing things. We can actually, the concept of an energy positive home in the city was, kind of, sure, give it a try, buffer our exposure. I was able to convince people that we should do this because I said, look, if we screw it up, the worst thing we'll get is really good buildings, right? So take a leap with me. And, and everyone was up for it, and in fact, it proved to be fairly easy to do. And I don't mean to belittle all the great thinking that went into this work, but I think with the Innovation District, we have a lot more brain power kicking around that's ready to robustly, not with guilt, but with a real joy and a real sense of responsibility, respond to climate change. So I'm very optimistic today. We've got a ton of work to do. No patience.
Yeah, I think I can follow that, and I work of course with innovators and entrepreneurs all the time, and I've developed a definition for innovation finally that I feel pretty good about, but I'm always tweaking it. But I find that innovation is the process of bringing new ideas to market in a meaningful way. And it's a process. It doesn't happen just once. It is about new ideas, which is, I think, the central thing that people glom onto, which, is absolutely true. You have to bring those ideas to market. You have to, not just have them in a lab. You have to really get it out there and start changing things. And you have to do that in a meaningful way, right? You can't just sell it to your mom. And I think that if you are an innovator and you're used to thinking that way about how can we fit into a process that already exists and kickstart it and identify that change is happening in a certain area and not only resign yourself to that change or accept that change or be okay with that change, but to feel that you can channel that change and you can do it faster than anyone else and you can make money doing it. I mean, that's the kind of robust energy that you feel from these companies that are out there building inflatable wind turbines. I mean, can you think that this thing could exist? But it does. They built it in Fort Point. It's really incredible the scope of the challenges that they're taking on and making progress in lightning speed. And so I find that in terms of patients, my role in some ways is I mediate scales in terms of patients, I think, because the timelines that they're working with in their companies are so fast-tracked, and we even see the language in the entities that are developing to support these companies, right? They're accelerators, they're incubators, they're intended to push, 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 push. And then when you walk somebody around the Innovation District and they're like, oh, well, it's parking lots, what the heck, And it's well, in 2030, this is going to be different. Even in 2018 is going to be different. In 2014 is going to be different. Look how different it is already in 3 years. And so I find that I'm mediating between the patients that innovators have, which is less than zero. It's a negative, it's the opposite. It's just it's not even inpatient, it's beyond that. And the fact that development truly is this thing that takes a long time, and even though in 3 years, we've made a huge amount of progress in the Innovation District. 3,500 plus jobs and I think close to 200 new economy companies. That doesn't even count all the restaurants and the other kind of businesses that have been in the area. But really, new economy businesses, some big numbers there. So we know that in terms of economic development, in terms of kind of real estate development, we're moving fast. But that's in terms of the way they think about fast. Very different. So I do a lot of translating between thresholds of patients, I think.
In fairness to Kathy, we were talking about this beforehand, and we were all concurring patience is really essential. And Kathy had a wonderful example. I won't steal your example, but patience is warranted. We have to be patient for the right thing. And it comes with some steelness. You have to be able to say, that would be a quick answer, but probably not the right answer. And so I think when you're faced with that, you do have to have patience to wait it out for the right thing to happen. And I think that's, the Innovation District is a new brand for the Seaport District, which is a new brand for the Fan Pier and Piers 4, and et cetera. And in many ways, I think we have been fortunate, both Cambridge and Boston, in having been patient for the right thing. It could have easily been a big Walmart anchoring the middle of the Seaport District, which probably wouldn't have been very attractive to the convention center, which probably would have ended up, I don't know, maybe in Cambridge. And so patience has an important role.
Well, I'd also like to say there's a big difference between patience and apathy. When I was talking about patience, I was meaning that sometimes it takes a little while for things to catch on. It doesn't mean that you're not thinking about things. And in a way, I always compare Boston to California, where my children all migrated to. And they live with one example, one of them lives in Palo Alto, but the others live in car-driven cultures and work in Mountain View, California, and San Jose, which are our direct competitors in terms of looking for innovative businesses. And the physical environment of those places grew very, very fast and grew around the automobile. And we are just so lucky here to have, in a sense, the Boston mentality as well as the Boston landscape to organize our development around. And I think I read recently that Boston is now second in the country, and I think it's actually ahead of New York. Maybe this is just biotech venture capital. It could be technology venture capital, probably not. I think Boston's behind New York on that. And my kids who left here 15 to 20 years ago, and nobody's coming back, but I have to say that Boston has a new respect for them, and they actually find themselves staying at home with mom when they're making their business trips to Boston to talk to their investors here.
Thanks. I don't know if everybody's familiar with the concept of shifting baselines, but it's the idea that what's normal changes over time, that subconsciously we accept something as normal just because that's the way it's been for the last 5 years, but that may slowly move you away from what it was 30 years ago. Have you, three of you, seen shifts in either what's acceptable or in what's considered normal? And especially for you, what do you think is different about this generation in moving things forward, or is there anything different?
That's an interesting question. So I feel like I kind of want to answer that slightly in a personal way, and then I can talk a little more about my generational peers. But I never in a billion years thought that I was going to work for the city. Never, ever. It was not on my radar. George knows that when I was here, I was on my fingers and everything here, and people since then have been like, that makes sense, duh. But I just never thought of it, and I think that there were these there are those stereotypes that float around out there, right, about like what it's like to work in government and what government employees are like, and I just have to say that having now been at City Hall for a while, the energy there and the amount of smart people that are thinking in the same way as the businesses that I'm working with every single day that are truly at the leading edge of what they're doing. I mean, the Mayor's Office of New Urban Mechanics is, are people familiar with New Urban Mechanics? They're doing things like, making apps that in your car, you go over a pothole and then it reports the location of the pothole back, so you can get instant, real-time feedback about how to make the city better. Citizens Connect, things like that are so far ahead of what I find, people might think in my generation of what it's like to work for the government, right? So the vitality there has been invigorating for me, and so I think that that's a new normal, right? In some ways, that at least, and you guys can talk more about what it was like normal before, but there
wasn't as good as
this. I've been there for 5 months, so I'm full on greenhorn here and still very optimistic. But I think that impatience, I suppose, is normal. It's with millennials. I think it's an impatience about kind of optimizing yourself There's this entire movement called quantified self, if you're familiar with that. But the quantified self is this idea that you can track your steps for the day and when you eat and what time you're happy and what time you go to sleep, and you can feel your sleep patterns throughout the night. And by doing that and putting it in a spreadsheet or an app, you can get this kind of data that can turn you into a more mindful person and really push you forward, and productivity and life hacker and right. I mean, there's everybody's hacking everything. So I think that that's a universal sense that, no, we can figure this out. We have tools. We have things that are basically magic. I mean, iPhones are essentially magic for all I know about how to actually make an iPhone, and I think that there's this energy around the fact that is a part of what we've grown up with, that the possibilities feel so large that the impatience then, I think, comes from an inability to manage yourself as effectively in some ways as you think as now you're enabled to do. And I think that mentality comes out to everything, to conversations about climate change, to conversations about what type of building you need to live in. And we're seeing housing models and new types of offices that the most successful ones are the ones that are really about that kind of full-on optimization of your experience as really a human being. I mean, I think it's as big as that. So,
I think that was just great. And I'd like to offer the perspective of somebody on the other side of the divide. I'm one of the leading edge baby boomers, and what has been an absolute delight to me is understanding the new allure that cities have to people who are retiring. I have very, very few friends who want to retire to the places that people used to want to retire to 15 and 20 years ago. I frankly think that Boston and Cambridge is Cambridge, but Boston in general, is probably one of the better cities in the world to get old in, partly because it has a good transportation system. It has good opportunities for employment. It has opportunities for continued learning. And most important, it has opportunities to be around the energy of young people like you. You keep us young.
This is fascinating and maybe different from my colleagues. I'm actually a public official, regulatory official. I actually have a role in the review and approval of projects, which mean I have customers whom I don't get to choose. They come in the door, we get to, in essence, process and their projects. So shifting baselines is actually a wonderful thing for this work. And looking back at the green building work, we can look at the significant shift in the performance of buildings. It certainly isn't what we'd love it to be, but it's certainly quite different from what it used to be. But what we can also see is that the design of buildings has gotten better. We hadn't even and I'm an architect, I'm a registered architect, so I'm in the trade, as I say. But a long time ago, without any big conversation, we value engineered the architect and design pretty much out of a lot of projects. And it showed. And when you're in the permitting process and you see lots and lots of projects, you can see stuff. And of course, we have wonderful magazines that show you all the cool things that are happening in the world. But in our offices, 90% of the stuff is just stuff, and 50% of it needs help. And we do a lot to help it. And 25% of it's awful, and we do a lot of work to make it better. So the cool thing that happened along the way when we said, no, we have to build more responsibly. We need you and your team to spend more time thinking about how your building works. We need you to be more creative. We actually opened up the door to a conversation that hadn't happened for a long time, and that is, how smart can this building be? And people started to respond, certainly with green building, energy efficiency strategies. But if you looked at the building projects or the product of the process, it actually has been getting better. Despite a tougher economy, despite changes in the way we produce buildings or even produce the design of buildings. So I think shifting baselines is essential. It changes the expectations. We're going to do this with climate change preparedness. we will change the baseline of practice around that. And we're asking questions that people haven't even answered or thought about, excuse me. We have recently put out a climate change adaptation questionnaire. And again, working for an impatient client, it kind of is a real signal of what's to come. So it starts with, what's the elevation of your building? Do you even know? Are you in a floodplain? What's your freeboard above relative to sea level rise projection? So a lot of people that we sent this out to are like, I don't know, where do I find this stuff? It's like, yeah, go find it and come back. And so we have this wonderful opportunity of shifting baselines, especially, I think, and perhaps uniquely so in the public sector. The market does this very nimbly without, signaling that it's up to anything. It leaves what's dysfunctional, behind, and it just moves forward and it sort of excels. I love what Nicole was saying too about embracing the future. But we got to shift the base too. There's a floor that we work with.
I mean, I think that shifting baselines, I think, works in both directions, right? That we see it from the public, from the companies coming in, that their expectation is one thing, and I think in the other direction, the Innovation District as an initiative was truly a vision that I think then shifted the entire baseline of all of the development in that area. And now it's inbound to us, right? Before, in some ways, we had to really, push the message out there, get people pumped and tweet all the time and blogs and recruiting. And now we see people coming to us like, can we build innovation housing? Can I put together a networking event to connect startups with each other? How do I get involved all the time? And if you're familiar with the concept of inbound marketing, that's also, how that works, which in HubSpot in Cambridge is doing amazing work in this area. But the idea that if you just put the content out there of how you want to be and who you are, then the clients come to you because you understand that, of course, there is someone else that's going to respond because we're just better connected than we ever have been. And that connection can be facilitated much, much faster if you just put out the stuff that you feel the most comfortable with. So I think that emphasizing it as a kind of continuum in multiple directions is key to that concept.
Getting back to the policy and design, I'd like to put in a plug for infrastructure improvement and in particular transportation. And I'm thinking of the Innovation District and remembering that I was on the Silver Line the first night that it was running. And it was just so thrilling. It was actually by chance. I was going to a party at the Fish Pier and had read in the paper that it had started running, and I took everyone who was going to the party and said, come on, we're not driving, even though there's free driving. We're going to take the train down there, and we're going to not worry about driving home. And, the Silver Line probably was conceived of, what would you say, maybe 20 years ago? First began being talked about maybe 25 years ago. Don't discount the marketing function of the Silver Line, because thousands and thousands of people go through the Seaport District now, the Innovation District, on their way to the airport. And it became no longer an outpost, but a place that you passed through. And it's, if you ask people who might not have even known where it was. It was a little confused when it was South Boston, and people would say, oh, wait a minute, that doesn't look like South Boston. And I think that the investment in transportation is our really most pressing need in the Commonwealth right now. And I'm not talking about roads, although some of you who live in the suburbs might think that roads need it too.
The T also has made some really astounding leaps in terms of innovation very, very recently. And I feel like I should plug my friend over at the T, Josh Robin, the director of innovation, who's also a Husky grad, so go Northeastern. But the way that I know that he looks at innovation in the T is what couple of things can we achieve this year, right now, that will make people feel more comfortable, that will make people feel more informed. And that's why you see, opening up the data of of all of the train times and the schedules and everything. And I'm sure, people here are using Open MBTA and these other apps that just like totally change my life every single day, because I know when to leave my house and I can actually catch the bus and I don't have to stand in the rain. And I mean, it just, again, optimizing your life, right? I mean, it's all about that. And those countdown signs on the platforms, I mean, they make such a difference in people's day, just to know 3 minutes there will be a train, and you can everything just out of you when that happens. And I think innovation is this word, and like sustainability, they're these big words, but really when you come down to it, it's about how do human beings feel about being in that place, and then can you do something to make that better? And that can be as big as kind of a climate change initiative that's going to make sure it doesn't flood, but as small as an app that tells you that you're going to be able to get to your next meeting on time. And it's not so big and esoteric and scary. I mean, it's these really targeted interventions that a lot of times make the biggest difference.
This is a great conversation. I hate to cut it off, but we have about 5 minutes left. So I just wanted to quickly open up the floor for any questions or comments. Give you a chance. Yes, sir.
It's unusual to see both Cambridge and Boston on the same platform. I've been in both Cambridge for a long time, and the last 16 years in Boston. What prompts my question is as other places are becoming very competitive, we've heard about New York wanting to pick off our biotech companies and other companies. I'm wondering what your thoughts are about more thinking about sort of Boston-Cambridge as Boston-Cambridge, even though I understand the difference between the politics of Boston being a mayoral organized political system and Cambridge being quite different. But I worry a little bit about the so-called always competitiveness. Your comment was, or somebody's comment about Vertex went over there. Well, those of my children and my now grandchildren looking for jobs and concerned about the economy, I see this sector as part of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So I wondered if you might comment a little bit about how it's possible for Cambridge and Boston, even though they can compete at the same time and even in relationship to transportation, think a little bit more together about the fact that this economy and what you both have is essential to our future.
So I think that what you're saying is something that we get asked about a lot. And I can absolutely answer that in terms of innovation. It's not a zero-sum game. There's an incredible brain trust here because we are so fortunate to have had all of these universities that have laid this incredible human capital infrastructure for all of us to really tap into in this region. And I think in terms of New York too, New York is, their Economic Development Corporation is just like pumping out ideas all the time. It's incredible how much stuff is just coming out of New York at faster and faster rates. But I think that fostering innovation and then getting back to a conversation too about sustainability, which is a big part of why we're here, it can't be a zero-sum game because that just hurts us in general. If Boston and Cambridge are so worried about competing with each other, then how on earth are we going to make any progress in terms of anything from, attracting companies to making sure that we're not flooded out. And in terms of innovation, the two cities are so linked globally in a perception way. I give tours and have visits from delegations all over the world. And Boston gets a lot of credibility from having Harvard and MIT across the river, but everybody calls it Boston. They don't call it Cambridge. And we've got Longwood Medical area, which gets more NIH funding than I think anywhere else in the country. And the two are so inextricably linked in terms of the innovation experience. Even the red line crosses between the two, and the average person coming around the street and going back and forth to meetings, it's an absolutely seamless connection. That's the way that I see it on a day-to-day basis in terms of kind of interacting with the innovation economy. And I'd be curious to hear your answer over there.
I think that if you get yourself past the Mississippi River, most people don't know the difference between Boston and Cambridge. Around here, having served as an elected official in Cambridge, there is a certain amount of paranoia, and it's really pretty stupid. And I don't think it's very deep-seated. Unfortunately, sometimes the press likes to make conflict where there's not conflict, and Boston is a much bigger city than Cambridge, and wise people understand that we're a region.
I think the work ahead of us is also going to really put an end to these kinds of divisions for all intents and purposes. And I think we're also learning that these management units, i.e. cities, are just that. They're manageable size units, but regions work as regions. We share transit, we share environment. The challenges we had ahead of us with climate change and sea level rise are not going to be just Boston or Cambridge or Somerville or Everett or Chelsea. We're all going to be working at this together. And our success as a region is regional. The institutions are on both sides of the river. They're feeding the commerce and the creativity that is all around this. And we, I enjoy Kendall Square and Central Square. They're great places to go. And even our universities, I think, have been noticing an unparalleled working together. We're working on health in the built environment right now. We actually have representatives from all the schools of public health participating in the conversation. And that's just because it's so important and there's so many different thoughts in the space that there's no reason to pick one over the other. We will do far better drawing from our collective experiences and applying those to the challenges as opposed to trying to one-up one another. So I think our future is actually really bright for a lot less of that, and I wouldn't worry too much about it, honestly.
That's a great place to end. I'd like to thank all three of you for a really great discussion, and we'll move to the next panels. Thank you.